Hello, and welcome to our Builder of Choice Insights podcast. I am so excited about our podcast today. I have Thomas Berrington visiting with me today. He just recently joined our team. He was the CIO of French Brothers, and I am excited to have him come in here and talk to us a little bit about technology, data analytics, understanding AI. We have a full lineup today for you, so buckle up, get your pens, pencils, take some notes, and enjoy the show. Hi, Thomas. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Emma. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Oh, great. Well, I want to have you introduce yourself. We just got to know each other recently, but what's so exciting is I've known about you for a few years now because Kevin from French Brothers has been talking you up for a long time. I know you joined him right out of grad school, and he was so excited about the passion you have around data analytics and data architecture and the way that you were able to implement that into his company. So if you could take just a minute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your history.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of give my background. So, from New Mexico, I went to New Mexico State University for my MBA. While I was finishing that program, French Brothers was looking for a data analyst. My background was in information systems, so the two aligned really closely. Once I joined on with French Brothers, it was clear they were still in kind of the where most home builders are with Excel spreadsheets and relying on a lot of separated hand keyed reports. So I knew there was a ton of potential to use some of the cloud based systems out there. And in talking with Kevin and in Tom French, it was listen, give me the opportunity to sit in on some of the strategic meetings and hear some of the problems that you have that you're dealing with every day, and I'll find solutions for that. I'll find ways to leverage the data that's in the system to come up with solutions. And I was just fortunate enough that they had the confidence in me, and they gave me plenty of runway and plenty of opportunities to leverage my skill set and eventually Power BI, some custom app development to show, well, here's how we can leverage the data within our systems and some of them outside of our systems, pull it together to make business decisions, and really cut down on some of the administrative overhead that we were experiencing at the time.
That's incredible. And then we're so lucky that you have a passion to take what you've learned there and spread it across the entire home building industry and join us in working with some of the builders that we work with. So we are so excited to have you here with us today. I'd like to start off real quick because one of the things that I hear in our builder groups, and it's time and time and time again in our seminars, all of the builders are so excited about AI and technology. And there's always been this joke that home building industry is the last one to adopt technology. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but it's a rumor that goes around. But one of the things is I know a lot of them are trying AI, but I'm not sure that there's a good definition or good understanding of what AI is and how it works. Can you give us a quick definition about what AI is and how different builders can be using it, or have you seen using them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to me the simplest way to describe it, and it works for any industry and any age, is that AI is simply pattern recognition, right? It's really just looking for patterns within data. The more data it has, the more patterns it can identify, or the more accurate it can identify. It can identify that pattern. So that's really the foundation of what AI is. Even in the generative side of it, if it's creating content, it's because it's been fed a ton of literature in the past or a ton of posts that it has to pull from, and it knows a pattern of words to put together that makes sense. Same with as when you look at the organizational side of data, as it has a pattern, as you put more data into it, it's able to identify things within pictures, like cars or trees or signs. And an interesting fact about that is the CAPTCHA articles or the CAPTCHA feature in password management that a lot of people do is actually how most AI was trained early on. So when you were asked about identify the stop sign in the picture or click on the bicycle in the picture, most of that was done prior to AI being released. Well, that was what was training the AI model on what those objects were. So that's where it was creating those patterns, is through those captchas.
Oh, wow. So, what are some of the things that you think that as we get into AI and some of the things that builders are using AI for, what kind of mistakes are they making with the assumptions that they have of AI? Are there any mistakes that you kind of see them doing and you're like, hold back or caution? Are there any things that you think they need to be cautionary about with AI?
Well, I mean, I think most people right now are jumping into the generative side of things, ChatGPT, Claude. I think what people really need to be cautious about in terms of AI is understanding what they're exposing to those systems. If they're loading their contracts into it, they have to understand, are they getting generated information back, or is it guardrailed against that information? And it will tell you. I think that the current meme right now going around is, is this mushroom poisonous? No, it's not. And then it shows a gravestone of somebody did, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry. It turns out that was actually poisonous. You're right. And it's, AI is trained to return information, to generate information, but you have to be very cognizant of, is it generated information or is it retrieving information? So making sure that the AI models are grounded on your organizational data so that it's not generating information when it should be retrieving information, I think is the most important thing for organizations to be focused on right now.
That's a very good point. Um, Now let's take a shift over to data. So now we've talked a little bit about AI and how builders can use that and all the information that people are putting into it. But you and I just had a discussion and we talked about data and all the information that gets put into these systems. One thing is we can get overloaded with all kinds of things. And I just got back from a managing for profit and we used a video from when Chuck was doing managing for profit several years ago. And one of the things he talked about was how prior to computers, so we're talking early 80s, they were using data in a very streamlined fashion. So they had a system set up where they put the sales information in and they passed that all the way through to the end of the sale. And then he said when computers came out, it got loaded up with all kinds of data. And then all the systems were like, oh, we can make this report for you and this report for you and this report for you. And it got to be very report heavy to where there was no idea what reports were actually beneficial. So now we're in a place where not only do we have all the information that was beforehand, before AI, now we have the Internet of Things and all of these different pieces of information. How do we sort that to really start making meaningful reports?
So I think that's where the key piece is being able to structure your data in such a way that you can query it using natural language. So you can ask questions, and AI understands those questions and is able to retrieve the answer based on your data. Um, Now, obviously, some of that's a little bit more complicated in terms of how you go about structuring that. Some of that comes into database management, making sure that you're leveraging the correct systems, making sure that systems are connected. Obviously, most businesses are operating in a multi-cloud environment. Maybe you have a scheduling software or an ERP software like ECI. You may have a separate CRM, and it's how do you get them to talk so that AI is not leveraged against a single set of data, but leveraged against all of your data, and that it's integrating so that it's finding those patterns against all sources of your data.
So is that what you would call your data architecture? Because I think you've mentioned that a couple of times, and we're working with architects all the time, but looking at it as a data architect, can you explain a little bit about what that means as far as that terminology? I mean, I know what it looks like for building a house, but what does it look like
Sure.
when you're
Yeah,
doing
and
that
I
with
think
data?
that's a great analogy, right? It's really the blueprint or the framework of how all of your systems connect, right? So when you look at the blueprint of a home, you see how the bedroom connects to the living room. It's that same idea with the architecture of your environment, right? And what's unique about the home building industry versus a lot of other industries is there are kind of complex nuances in terms of the project management, in terms of scheduling, that I think requires specific expertise at looking at how you architect the data and how it's structured, so that you're not looking at it, it's not transaction based. There's very few transactions in home building. It's more project and scheduling and time management based, and having that understanding going into the architecture makes such a difference into how you can leverage AI systems going forward.
And what is one of the things that when you were working with the builder, and you've worked with a couple other builders since then, what is something that like you said, it's very different than most other organizations or most other industries. What's How is it that you're able to specialize in that? What makes it unique that you're able to kind of notice what it is? What are some of the nuances that you see that help make it easier for you when you go into a builder to talk about those things?
I've had the opportunity, yeah, to work with several builders across the country. French Brothers had given me the opportunity. Now working with Bessler Homes as well up in Colorado, as their CIO, to be able to see some different systems, really getting a deep understanding of all of the different functional areas within home building, from land development to purchasing and estimating to scheduling and construction and permitting, and understanding how all of those pieces work together. It's such a different process than, say, the manufacturing side of things, where you're more supply chain focused and more transactional focused. Having a specific understanding of the differences, from a supply chain management, if you're working with a trade base that's bringing in a lot of their materials and their turnkey, that's significantly different supply chain than, say, a manufacturing unit where it's right on time type management. You're just bringing things in on as you're producing them.
Mm-hmm.
So having that understanding of how the data flows between different vendors, between permitting process, how it's very time based, all has an impact into how you structure it, so that the data is not just formatted in raw number format, but making sure that it's structured in date and time format, so that as you're asking questions later on about how many days did this take, well, it can accurately predict that because it's not in an incorrect format.
Right. And we talked about like some of the important questions that you're asking of data. So this idea of having the data structured properly with time, dollar amounts, vendor, maybe even your superintendent, your like what department, what community it was in, what plan it was in, because there's a lot of nuances to each piece of data. It's not just like it touched this and this and this, because it's like one to many. Everything is one to many attributes. And so understanding how to connect those dots so that you can get a good answer to a question. And one of the questions that you mentioned that some is probably very important right now is understanding incentives. How many dollars am I giving away in incentives, and for which plans? So tell me a little bit about how, like when you're looking at data, how does that structure work without going into too much detail?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So it's, I think that comes down to the reporting platform, right? If your data is structured in a way that you don't have to have just the standardized reports. I think a couple years ago, we talked about it, where incentives probably weren't a really relevant report, right? Homes were just flying off the shelf and it didn't matter as much. Whereas nowadays, a lot of the builders that I'm talking to, they also, well, I need to see my incentives. I need to see my incentives. Well, that's really important right now. And if the data is structured in the correct way, to where you're looking at not just the sales price, but what the budget is and how much you're giving away, and you can access all of that data together and create that report, that's fantastic, because you can see it in a time when it's important. As the markets slowly improve, we may be looking at different areas. It may be back into cost of goods, or into production times, cycle rates, where that becomes more important to keep up with the demand. But right now, we need to look at a certain set of reports and be able to dive into them. So having the data structured correctly allows you to surface that information and then dive into it.
Yeah. And I think that's key because one of the things that we talk about too, and in managing for profit, one of the things we have is like, you don't necessarily need all of the reports. And we go over certain things, variance reports, and we go over some financial reporting, and we use those as like the key. We look at that and it shows us where do we need to direct our attention, because one of the things we talk about is management by exception. And so basically having this ability to look at data or information reports in a way that points to where the questions might be. So you might look at a report and see that your gross profit is off. Well, why is my gross profit off? And then you go look and you see, oh, well, our direct construction costs are off. And then you might dig a little deeper and see which plan is creating higher direct construction costs. And you can dig a little deeper, right? And so is this something that with the proper architecture of data that you can find those answers very quickly and start holding people accountable to and assigning responsibility to people to be able to solve those problems more efficiently?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have the right systems and you have the right buy-in from the entire team, it can make tremendous impact on the operational bottom line, on net income, by driving who has ownership of the fields that are driving the reports, and working with them so that they understand if it's scheduling reports, making sure that they understand when you check that off, that's showing the cycle rate, and so that your production team understands how those reports are being generated. All of that has such a big impact on how these reports are being viewed by management or by investors, and it can make an impact, tremendous impact for the entire team to be able to drive those results and see the impact of those results very quickly. On top of that, you're not just looking at the great thing with reporting. You mentioned about scheduling or looking at reports by exception. You're not looking at every single home maybe that you're working on in WIP, but ideally you have somebody that's designing reports so that you're just focused on what the underlying problem is. Right? You don't just want a report that shows the cycle rates. Ideally, what you want to see is cycle rates so that you can identify the homes that aren't performing or that are overperforming, and we can replicate that.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's being able to get that reporting platform as advanced as possible. So you're not just providing the information for them to ask another question, but you're going deeper into that and answering that root question and providing that information.
Wow. And then ultimately taking action.
Yeah, it allows you to, if something's underperforming, you can decide. Chuck talks about it a lot in his Managing for Profit. If you have a model or a floor plan that you're maintaining, but you're building once or twice a year, how much effort does that take? And if the margins on it are terrible because you're not keeping it up to date and you're not maintaining it, but when you build it, you throw it in because sales was able to sell it. Well, now all of a sudden you're throwing away margin, and we might as well just eliminate that plan. And we can see that very quickly by this information. We ask of our data, what floor plans have we built less than 5 of and have a lower than 10% gross margin? We start surfacing that, and really quickly, rather than having a report that shows gross margin of our models, we already really quickly here's our short list that we need to ask a question of why. We're not having to go through all the data and sift through anything else. We just started looking at the few plans that we're not building very many of, and they don't give us very good margin. And the question to me would be, why would we be doing those?
Yeah. Why are we giving away the farm?
Yeah.
To build these plans? Yes, because building them just to get volume, you're basically building them for free or for practice.
Yeah.
You did mention one thing that I thought was very important. It was kind of hidden in your answer earlier, was creating buy-in. And I know when you very first started in this industry, that buy-in wasn't necessarily automatic. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looked like for you, and how um, what were some of the challenges you faced with getting buy-in into understanding the data architecture, AI, using technology to become more efficient and effective in the organization?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to having someone truly focused on pushing the technology and pushing that initiative. Because if you're relying on your purchasing person or your construction person or COO, they have so many other priorities that the technology will inevitably fall to the bottom and
Mhm.
they'll revert back to what they know. You need to have somebody whose core focus is technology initiatives. And you need to have them just constantly reiterating in a constructive way to utilize the platform. And when there are roadblocks, to identify those and work with the people in the team to understand why there are those roadblocks. Maybe there's a lack of knowledge about the platform. There's a lack of understanding how to use it, lack of comfortability. But it's working with them, creating a plan to get through that so
Mhm.
that you can adopt those technology platforms, typically that come at a cost to the business. So if you're not using them, you're throwing money away through licensing cost. So using all of those licensing effectively, and typically the more advanced systems will do what you currently do, but with significant added benefit that somebody who's focused on the technology can really leverage and go, you know what, using lists versus Excel, it's very similar, but you can build a ton more automations using a dynamic list versus just an Excel spreadsheet. And that leads to efficiencies in terms of, well, I've added it here and now my whole team's notified of the permitting process or of a new hire or whatever it is. But you can automate a lot more things in there. And it's the same data entry that you would do either way, but it leads to a ton of efficiencies. And having that understanding of what's available within technology and helping you migrate to those more advanced systems and showing you the vision, that's really the power of having somebody who's focused on technology.
Hmm. One thing you mentioned lists. It's the same as Excel. List is part of Microsoft 365, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So many people are using Microsoft 365 and Teams, and are trying to add on all kinds of other pieces of technology. And this is one of the things that um, I think is really important that you do, is you take an examination of the technology that's already being licensed, as you said. They already have it in their possession, they already have access to it, but they're not using it. And so, one thing I think is really neat that you said you've done with different builders is that you analyze what they have and see if they're using it and help them maximize what they have before adding other things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So a perfect example, and without giving any names, there's a premium whiteboarding app that a lot of people will use. Typically, it comes at an additional cost, something for each user. It's about 250 or so a year for each user that's using this premium whiteboarding or visual tool. Um, what we find is that most builders will also be on 365 when they're using that. They're not familiar with either Visio or Whiteboard. And then I'll look at the use case for what they're using this other platform for, and all of that functionality, or 95% of that functionality, is available within their current licensing within 365. So it's showing them that you already have this functionality in your current licensing, and by paying that additional amount, and sometimes it's a monthly charge, $30-40 a month, for this additional functionality, Is that additional charge, and especially right now with markets as tight as they are, when we look at, well, how can we reduce? I think G&A is a great area to look at, and software expenditure. Is that really worth that additional? Well, it provides curved lines, or I don't like the Microsoft product as much because it doesn't look as polished. Well, most of these documents that are getting created are only used internally, and they're really just to kind of show they're not being presented in a professional manner. Or if they are, with a little bit extra work, they can be polished within that platform
Mm-hmm.
for a significantly cheaper price. And then it's, on top of that, you're moving that data outside of the sole ecosystem from an identity and access management standpoint. It makes it more difficult for your organization to manage that information. Now it's leveraged in a third party software system, so that if you have AI within the Microsoft, it can't access any of that information that you have there.
Huh. Interesting. So basically, what you're able to do is help them streamline their tech stack and understand exactly what they have available to them, and try to clean that all up so it's all under one umbrella. And then also, at the end of the day, it makes it more efficient because you're keeping everything within the same platform, essentially, as best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being within the industry and having that understanding, it's really creating that entire vision of, each of those individual pieces, may sound kind of like the shiny new thing. And it's, well, what do we really need to do that individual thing for? But it's having the entire industry vision of, well, by integrating it within Microsoft and having some of the automations run, most of the permitting is done through email now or through automated platforms. Where if we can push some of that information as soon as we release a home from Mark Systems or for Constellation or whatever our ERP system is, well, that can generate an email to our purchasing team to review POs, that can send the email automatically to our local municipality for the permit. When that comes back in, AI can review the incoming email to look for deficiencies, notify the correct team if there are those deficiencies. If there's not, then it can file that the permit was done correctly. And it's having that entire vision of all of this connects together if we build it all together and if it's all integrated. But if each functional area is coming up with their own technology stack,
Mm-hmm.
that never happens. It stays fragmented from sales to purchasing to construction to closing. So you have to have that understanding of how everything is flowing, not just within your business, but you're also dealing with trade partners. You're also dealing with local municipalities. There's also all of the tax payments and everything else from an accounting standpoint. If there's investors, it's how do we get all of that information, really our entire ecosystem, not just the operational side of things where we focus on the ERP, but that entire ecosystem coming together so that the business becomes truly efficient.
Wow. That is a lot of and it's a lot of thinking too, right? It's not just like you said, let's not look at the bright shiny object. Let's look at what is going to make us not only efficient but effective in all the things that we do. And how does it relate to, and we go back to that concept that Chuck and Emma have had, the one to one to one relationship, where you have one scheduling point, you have one estimating point, one purchasing point, one pay point, one accounting point. So it's all one thing. It sounds like that the idea that you're talking about is very similar to that concept, where everything has to be connected in order for it to be efficient and effective in getting what all the information that you need to be able to make decisions and have the organization run in an organized fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll even highlight the builder partnerships, right? To have the data situated in the correct way to make rebate processing as effective as
Mm-hmm.
possible. It has to be structured in that way, or you have to leverage an additional person to kind of help that data get put in the system and to get a lot of rebates through back. Versus if you spend the time on the front end and make sure that your data is architected in the correct way, all of that can be an automated process and be ran very smoothly. So all of that is kind of where it comes down to that initial setup and initial thought process of, okay, here's our long-term vision of, we don't want to have to intervene with this data. When we release a home, Eventually, I just want to get money back from my rebate program without any other intervention. And that's how it should work. And I should be able to ask questions about, okay, well, how much have I gotten back in my rebates? All of that information should come together. If it's set up the correct way, it absolutely can. But it's, right now there's so many builders, they go, well, it doesn't work that way. And it's, well, we don't have product information in, or we don't have all of our closings put in. We're not closing homes out correctly, and our systems aren't connected. And then we're wondering why there's so much friction.
Oh yeah. And then that's where you have the silos too, right? Like you have departments that are working independently and not really necessarily considering what information is needed for the next department as you move down the line. And so this allows the opportunity for the departments to get the information they need while also providing the information that the next department needs for the process for the home to move down the manufacturing line, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Um, So here's a question. Let's say you're not working with somebody who is just getting started and data is just kind of all over the place and in different places. Is this an impossible task, or is it something that with the right attention and the right people on board, you can go from a disorganized as whatever level of disorganization with data structure? Is it something that is feasible to accomplish, or is it an impossible task?
No, no, it's nothing's impossible, right? Just ask AI; it'll make it possible. No, it's really for any size or for any stage you're at within your kind of AI maturity model. You can certainly start making progress on it. For small builders that are going, well, I'm doing 10 homes a year. I don't leverage an ERP system. What can I do? You can structure your data correctly within your collaborative online system. We've talked a lot about Microsoft, but if you're in Google, if you're in GCP, or using Slack or any of those other, even if you're in HubSpot, um, you know, NetSuite, really any platform that you're storing your data in will allow you to customize how that information is stored, and making sure that how you're storing data is structured. You're not just throwing all of your plan files or all of your invoices and POs into a single folder called invoices. Maybe you have a file architecture where it's by project, and then invoices, and then sales information. But having some kind of structure will allow your business to scale, because then as you get large enough to get into those more complex and costly systems, your data can be implemented into them that much easier. And I think that's the big thing right now is implementation. We're trying to implement an AI. A lot of the big companies are. But if you're a smaller company, maybe you're just trying to implement an ERP system. Well, if your data has been messy to start, that implementation process takes significantly longer and most likely will not be as clean as if your data was structured to begin with. So if you're too small for an ERP system right now, it's okay. Let's figure out how do we structure the small amount of data that we have so that we're ready to make the next step. If we're
Mm-hmm.
in an ERP system, it's okay. Let's look at how much we're leveraging it, and can we leverage it more to make sure that we're maximizing that license. If we're growing beyond just that and we've expanded to different business ventures, and we have things outside of our ERP system, well, how do we look at connecting that ERP data to a centralized database that connects to all of these other business ventures, so that as we're pulling that data, it all comes together at the correct levels, and just looking at how we get to that next level. There's always room for improvement. What does that roadmap look like?
That's awesome. And basically, at any level, there's a need for organized data, regardless. Like you said, if you're building 10 or fewer homes, you still need to have your data set up and organized, particularly if you're looking at scaling. And I know we've talked to several different builders who are looking at like, hey, I just started. How do I grow? How do I grow? And I think one of the most important things is to really understand how to manage your organization and your data. I think those two things are simultaneous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in this day and age, I think far too much emphasis is put on, or far too little emphasis is put on data and its important as an asset of an organization. So how the organization runs and the information that it's collecting is so powerful to leverage to determine where it can go. Or it's, when you look at a SWOT analysis, its strengths, weaknesses, threats, advantages. You've got to use all of your data and all of the information that you have available to you. Now that we're collecting, I was recently at a Microsoft conference, and they said 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. With all of that information being so recent and created so recently, we need systems and we need AI to be able to process that amount of information. It's simply being generated and created faster than we can process ourselves. And labor costs have grown too quickly to just keep throwing additional people at a problem to create reports or to analyze the information. We need the systems in place to be able to analyze this exponentially growing amount of information. As systems get more advanced, we're going to start looking at augmented technologies that assist in permitting process or assist in inspection platforms. Well, all that's going to generate a ton more data that we will need to process and make sure that it's structured correctly and secured correctly so that we're not exposing sensitive data.
Wow. So much data, so much information. And Thomas, you are a bundle of knowledge. It's great. It's great to talk to you because I think a lot of times we think we know, but I don't think we know as much as there is to know about data and AI and technology. And it's amazing that statistic that 90% of all information or data has been created in the last 2 years. And I think they said that when I was getting my master's degree a few years ago, that all, the Internet of Things, all of this stuff has just been created in the last 5 years. And to think that that is exponentially growing year over year over year over year it's mind blowing. Well, I think we're going to start wrapping up here, but I do want to ask if there's one thing you want to leave our listeners with. What is the one thing you want to leave them with today?
I think it's start working on a plan to innovate. There's always something to advance towards. There is a way to become more efficient, and leveraging technology and leveraging both your internal data as well as your collective partner systems can vastly improve the efficiency. Given that we're all home builders and that we're all looking for efficiency in such a tight market right now, I think there is so much potential to reduce some administrative costs by leveraging technology and making sure that your systems are as efficient as possible. So I think that's where builders can focus right now is focusing on their internal systems, not just on building, trying to cut costs on homes, but look at your operational efficiency and try and reduce those costs.
Agreed. Because you can have a good gross profit and you can screw it up in the end if you don't have an efficient operation. So it's very important to make sure you're building your operation efficiently and effectively on the internal side as well. So Thomas, thank you so much for being with us today. This was fantastic. A world of knowledge. I just, and I love the analogy that we talked about with data architecture and home architecture, and how those two things are very closely related, and really thinking through how you set your data up so that it all makes sense, so that you can use it in the most effective manner moving forward, knowing that AI is going to take off, and being able to ask the right questions and getting the right answers so you can start making really good decisions in your organization. So thank you for joining me today. I look forward to more conversations like this. So thank you, those of you who are with us. Join us again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching or listening. Give us a like and leave a comment. And if you thought of somebody, be sure to send them a link so they can listen too. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback. Is there a specific topic or special guest that you want to hear about? Let us know. Did you like what you heard? Then I've got great news for you. You can listen to this episode along with many more at Builder of Choice Insights, where I talk with industry experts on crucial concepts that help builders become the builder of choice. If you don't want to miss this next episode, then be sure to turn on your notifications, hit that like button, and subscribe.